Imagine a time when the seas of the world were vast, uncharted and terrifying, when the horizon promised both untold riches and untold dangers. Now, picture a fleet of ships so immense and powerful that they dwarfed anything seen before. They weren't just ships, they were floating cities, carrying the wealth of an empire. They were commanded by one of the greatest explorers the world has ever known. This is the story of Zheng He, the Chinese admiral who ruled the waves long before Columbus ever set sail. In the early 15th century, under the rule of the mighty Yongle Emperor, China embarked on a series of voyages that would astound the world. These weren't mere trading missions, they were grand displays of power intended to place China at the center of the world stage. Leading these voyages was Zheng He, a man who would become a symbol of China's dominance on the seas. But his story is not just about exploration. It's about the rise and fall of a naval empire, a tale of ambition, power, and the fleeting nature of glory. Zheng He's life journey began in the remote mountains of Yunnan in southwestern China. Born in 1371 to a Muslim family, his early life was marred by violence and upheaval. His father, an official in the Mongol Empire, was killed during a military invasion by Chinese troops. Zheng He, then just a boy of 10, was taken prisoner and subjected to a fate that would forever change his life. He was castrated and forced to serve as a eunuch in the imperial court. But Zheng He's intellect and charisma caught the eye of a powerful prince, Zhu Di, who would later become the Yongle Emperor. The two men formed a bond, forged as they fought side by side in the civil wars that would eventually place Zhu Di on the throne. When Zhu Di gained power and became the Yongle Emperor in 1402, he elevated Zheng He to the rank of admiral. The emperor entrusted him with a mission of unprecedented scale and ambition to lead the greatest fleet the world had ever seen. The emperor's vision was grand, and his ambitions knew no bounds. He ordered the construction of a massive fleet of ships. The Nanjing shipyards became a hive of activity, ultimately producing nearly 1,000 ships, including the legendary treasure ships, or Baochuan. These ships were marvels of engineering, with some reaching lengths of up to 138 meters and dwarfing the ships of later explorers like Columbus. They could carry vast amounts of cargo, including silk, porcelain, tea, and gold. But they also carried something even more valuable, the prestige and power of the Ming dynasty. Each voyage was a statement to the world that China was a force to be reckoned with. Politically, the Yongle Emperor sought to assert his legitimacy and power, both at home and abroad. By sending Zheng He and his fleet to the farthest corners of the known world, he aimed to establish China's dominance. Foreign rulers were expected to offer tribute to the Chinese emperor in exchange for the privilege of trading with China. The treasure ships carried with them the finest goods that China had to offer. In return, Zheng He's fleet brought back precious spices from India, pearls from the Arabian Sea, and even animals from the distant shores of Africa. Over the course of 3 decades, Zheng He led 7 epic voyages that would take him and his fleet to the farthest reaches of the known world. Each voyage was a monumental undertaking, involving thousands of men, hundreds of ships, and covering vast distances across the Indian Ocean, the Arabian Sea, and the coastlines of Africa. The first voyage of Zheng He was from 1405 to 1407. This voyage set the stage for all that would follow. In 1405, with a fleet of 317 ships and nearly 28,000 men, he set sail from the port of Nanjing. His destination was the bustling ports of Southeast Asia and India. The sight of Zheng He's fleet must have been awe-inspiring to the people of these regions. The rulers of these lands were impressed by Zheng He's diplomacy and by the generous gifts offered. They quickly gave their allegiance and agreed to send ambassadors to the Ming court. The second and third voyages took place between 1407 and 1411. These voyages were marked by both diplomacy and conflict. The admiral visited Vietnam, Thailand, Malacca and Java, crossed the Indian Ocean to India, and then to Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, at the time called Ceylon, Zheng He encountered resistance from a local king who attempted to plunder the treasure ships. But Zheng He was a formidable military leader. He captured the king and took him to China, where he was released only after pledging loyalty to the Ming dynasty. On the third voyage, Zheng He traveled west and stopped in India. On his return trip in 1411, he touched at Samudra on the northern tip of Sumatra. The fourth voyage took place from 1413 to 1415. The fourth voyage was the most ambitious yet. Zheng He pushed further westward, reaching the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea. His fleet visited the great trading cities of Hormuz and Aden, and he even led a delegation to the holy city of Mecca. The journey continued down the eastern coast of Africa, where Zheng He and his men marveled at the exotic animals and riches of the Swahili coast. Zheng He's trip from Nanjing to Mecca covered approximately 8,000 miles, surpassing the distance of Columbus's voyage of about 5,000 miles from Spain to the Caribbean. The fifth and sixth voyages were from 1417 to 1422. These voyages returned the foreign envoys that had been brought to China during the earlier expeditions. Zheng He revisited the courts of Southeast Asia, India, and Africa, strengthening the bonds that had been established earlier. He returned to China early with part of his fleet, but he ordered the rest of the fleet to continue exploring the eastern coast of Africa. The seventh and final voyage was from 1431 to 1433. It was undertaken after a long hiatus. The Yongle Emperor died in 1424, and his successor, the Xuande Emperor, temporarily halted all expeditions. But in 1431, Zheng He, now 70 years old, was called upon to lead one last mission. Once again, he traveled to ports stretching from Asia to Arabia and onwards to Africa. On the return trip, Zheng He died in Calicut, India in 1433, and suddenly his travels were over. His body was buried at sea, yet his legacy would live on in the distant lands he visited, even as the age of exploration came to an abrupt end. The death of the Yongle Emperor marked the beginning of the end for China's maritime ambitions. The new emperor, Xuande, was not interested in continuing the expensive and risky voyages. He ordered a halt to all further expeditions and even went so far as to destroy the records of Zheng He's voyages. China turned inward, focusing on its own affairs rather than the wider world. The reasons for this dramatic shift are complex, involving a mix of political, economic, and ideological factors. The Confucian bureaucrats who advised the emperor saw the expeditions as a drain on the empire's resources. And so, China's days as a maritime superpower came to an end, and the great treasure ships were lost to history. Zheng He's legacy is one of both triumph and tragedy. He was a man who rose to command the greatest fleet the world had ever seen. He sailed across 160,000 sea miles or 300,000 kilometers, forging new connections between distant lands. His voyages were a testament to the power of the Ming dynasty, a golden age of exploration that has rarely been equaled. But Zheng He's story is also a cautionary tale. The sudden end of China's maritime ambitions serve as a reminder of how fast the tides of history can change. For a brief moment, China ruled the waves, its ships dominating the seas from Asia to Africa. But that moment passed, and with it the memory. We hope you enjoyed this journey and will join us again soon. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell for updates.